Evening, everybody. We very much appreciate all of the parents and guardians of Concord Middle School, our rising 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who are joining us in this early August evening. And we have a panel here, and our panel is made up of about a third or maybe a quarter of the CMS Building-Based Reopening Task Force. So I'm going to ask every member of the panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to start because we have people in the audience who are not just new to this brave new world of opening hybrid and supporting remote instruction, but we have families who are brand new to Concord. And of course, all of our rising, not all of our rising 6th grade families, but many of our rising 6th grade parents and guardians are also new to the middle school. So I am Mr. Cameron. I am the Concord Middle School principal. I am entering into my 4th year as middle school principal. And again, I welcome all of you. Laura Brand, do you want to go next?
Certainly. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Brand. I am the team chair for special education for the middle school. And following Mr. Cameron's lead, I'm starting my 2nd year in Concord.
And do you want to, we used to call it in 7th grade reading, do you want to popcorn it over to somebody else?
Sure thing. I'll go down to Olive.
Hi there, Olive Bradford. I'm one of the 2 assistant principals at Concord Middle School. Spent most of my time, this was my 1st year in the Peabody building. Tyler.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tyler Steffi, and this is my 3rd year at Concord Middle School. I'm the other assistant principal, and I spend my days at Sanborn primarily. Let's see here. Miss Jemison.
Hi, my name is Deborah Jemison, and I work as the MEDCO academic liaison and also the bus monitor for MEDCO. I've been with Concord for 10 years in the MEDCO tutor position also. And Miss Baker.
Hi, I'm Karen Baker. I teach 7th grade math at Sanborn, and I've been at both buildings actually. I've been in the district for about 15 years. And I'll go to Alessandra.
Hi, I'm Alex Nugent, and I'm a rising freshman.
Alex, may you pick the next person, please?
Oh, yeah, Popcorn Maya.
Thank you.
My name is Maya McCabe, and I am a rising 9th grader.
I think we're over to Lincoln.
I'm Lincoln Green, and I'm a rising 8th grader.
Meg.
Hi, I'm Meg Jensen. I am school nurse at the middle school Peabody. We used to be at Thoreau. I'm also a parent with 2 middle school students this year. And I think I get to popcorn it to Dr. Hunter, which hopefully everyone knows.
Thanks, Meg. Lori Hunter, Superintendent of Schools. I came along when Mr. Cameron did. So we're both starting our 4th year. And thank you. We're glad to see everybody tonight.
Excellent. And this webinar is being recorded. And I'll share how we're recording, even those who are in the audience this evening, how our recording might be helpful in part of our format that we're going to be delivering a lot of information to our families this evening. Before moving ahead in the agenda and naming the agenda for the evening, I do want to publicly thank this panel, who's a part of the CMS Reopening Task Force, who has been very engaged in how school is going to look for our students, for our teachers, and for our faculty and staff, for our families as well, since late June. These last 2 weeks in particular, since the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education came out with a lot of their guidance in late July. The 4 working groups that will be discussed in a video in about 10 minutes, their final reports came to this task force in just last week, actually. This week in particular, the 3 students who you see on the Zoom this evening as panelists, 2 of them have introduced themselves as rising freshmen or rising ninth graders. Proudly, they are alumni of the middle school. They have been on Zooms with the reopening task force twice today and in person for about 5 hours on Monday. So as a demonstration to the commitment that the students, the faculty, and the staff have in reopening schools for the 2020-2021 year, I again want to thank this group. Okay, this evening is meant to be a little bit over an hour. It's recorded. There is a second evening tomorrow for our students, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how the student evening tomorrow at 7 is going to feel different and look different. We're looking to infuse some fun into tomorrow's webinar for our students and to work on the mission statement that Dr. Hunter's task force crafted for the entire district, and that is building relationships. And how does that look in a remote world and in a hybrid world? So very quickly, our agenda this evening is I'm going to be showing all of our parents in just about a minute or two a video, and the video was made for the students as an audience. I do think it's very helpful for parents and guardians to watch and view. So it's going to be played this evening in just about a minute, and it's going to be played tomorrow evening as well. Then there's a summer fall website. So we are launching a Google site that has all the resources that a family and a student might need as we reopen schools in the fall. Then we have about 35 pre-submitted questions, most of them from parents, that we are going to answer. And then, and only after then, Mr. Steffi, I'm now remembering that you were going to remind me this. We're going to ask that after we go over the pre-submitted questions is when any parent or guardian can place their question in the chat feature. So again, we welcome everybody. We're thrilled to have families throughout Boston and throughout Concord joining us this evening. We have 214 Boston and Concord families, and we're gonna get going. So again, this is the first of 2 stops for this reopening task force. Tomorrow evening, we have a special guest that is unique to only our students. I'm working on the final details of this special guest. I do believe I'll have the final details along with the Zoom link for our students sometime either late this evening or tomorrow morning. I do make it a habit every time I email students important information, I also email the parents and guardians. And I am aware that our rising 6th graders don't have their email addresses yet. So either late this evening or first thing tomorrow morning, the student Zoom webinar information session that is happening tomorrow at 7 p.m. That Zoom address will be sent to all families and will be sent to our rising 7th and 8th graders as well. A part of that Zoom, as I mentioned just a minute ago, is a video that I would like to share with you all at this time.
Hi, my name is Lincoln Green, and I'm a rising 8th grader and member of the CMS Reopening Task Force that is made up of CMS students, teachers, staff, and parents. I'm also a member of Student Council. Before sharing with you some of the work that different working groups have completed around the district and the important work that Middle School Task Force is looking to complete right now, a quick review of where we are. On June 25th, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education released their initial fall school reopening guidance. Since then, through the leadership of the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Hunter, the district organized itself into a district-wide reopening task force and 4 important working groups. The 4 working groups for which CMS teachers, staff, and parents were part of worked throughout July to present the CMS Reopening Task Force their recommendations in the following reports. These reports were presented to the CMS Reopening Task Force on July 29th. Using these reports, which include concrete recommendations for the reopening of each building in the district, while still accepting these recommendations and guidelines that are still coming in. We are presenting in this video an overview of what school will look like for the CMS students in September. Please know that since this making of this video in late July, things will absolutely change, and a second presentation will be made at the end of August to all students and families. We also intend to release a very short social story video that I will explain more about at the end of this video. Concord Middle School is opening the 2020-2021 school year in a hybrid model. Dr. Hunter, who is our superintendent of schools, will again share how this looks at the middle school.
Concord Middle School and Concord Carlisle High School will attend school in an alternating schedule, split into two groups alphabetically, with group 1 attending on Monday and Thursday, and group 2 on Tuesday and Friday, with an alternating approach on Wednesday. Safety measures will be strictly in place, focused on all students and staff wearing masks and following regular hygiene protocols. Everyone will remain 6 feet apart to ensure safe distancing. Transportation will be reinvented to combine reduced school bus capacity with parent participation. Teaching and learning will maximize technology and in-person approaches to create engaging learning environments and foster connections and relationships.
Information such as what the middle school bell schedule looks like, maps of the building that share not only where classrooms are when you are in the building, but the new walking patterns for students in both buildings will be available on the new CMS reopening Google site published to students and families by the end of this week. All of this is pretty overwhelming for students like me, and I am a returning student to Concord Middle School in the Sanborn building. 6th graders new to Peabody building and 7th graders new to Sanborn building must be feeling a sense of anxiety. In the coming weeks, we will be releasing short social story videos from the student's perspective that will show how students are entering the school buildings after being dropped off from a bus or a car, or if the student walked or rode a bike. In late July, a professional videographer spent hours at both buildings capturing videos from their perspective of students in both Sanborn and Peabody. The videographer also spent time in both buildings building a social story of students transitioning from class to class that will be published in late August. Finally, a social story video will be made for lunches and how dismissal will look at the end of the day. If watching these videos help, but you believe actually coming into the buildings with your class schedule in hand might make you feel more comfortable, please wait for a sign-up from Mr. Cameron, where families can take self-guided tours of the building starting the week of August 17th. Like walking into a supermarket, you'll want to practice walking your class schedule with the new signs with arrows all around, sharing how you will transition from one class to another while keeping 6 feet away from your peers.
What do you think, Lincoln? That's your 4th time seeing it. All right, let's see if I can effectively close out this window without replaying the video like I've been doing every time that I show it. Exit full screen. Hey, I did it. Okay. So again, I want to thank Lincoln Green, who was the narrator for that video, and the work that the task force put into the video as well. I can't stress enough how important from the student perspective, let's see if I can actually find it, the release of this catalog of videos will be for our students, and quite frankly, our families, especially for the parents and guardians in Boston and Concord, you know, who sit with their rising 6th, 7th, or 8th grader the night before and saying, you know, we've talked about this, But at the same time, if we want to go to the CMS Google site, we can bring up the video of what it looks like when a student enters the building. All of these, what are called social story videos, will be put together as a category or a series of videos. Each will only be about, maybe 47 seconds, a minute and 12, and really get a sense of, students unpacking what a day looks like from their perspective. And we will have all these videos available to our families and to our students later this month. Then I also want to highlight here, which is my learning style. A lot of our work as a task force has been in the Zoom world, but my task force knows, because they have come to the building twice, once in July and then once this past Monday. My learning style is I feel better and my anxiety is eased when I'm there in person. Usually if I'm going someplace for the very first time and I know that it's close to where I live, I usually drive there the day before. That helps ease my anxiety. I'm going to be sharing this with our students tomorrow. So signing up for a self-guided tour. We're asking a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, an aunt to be with the rising 6th, 7th, and 8th grader. And we can't stress enough how important it is a printed out schedule will be for this walk around the building. Those tours begin the week of August 16th, technically the Tuesday, August 17th. Dr. Hunter, this is a good time to update on the calendar and the fact that any other school year in Concord, at least the last few years, August 17th seems to be really pushing on that late August start for students. But our first day of school for our students has been pushed back.
Yes, it has. So I will be sending this out either later tonight or tomorrow. Monday, my days blur together at this point. Monday night, the school committee reviewed the proposal that had been revised after the commissioner had lowered the required 180 days to 170. So we'll be starting the year with teacher professional time, so we can work through all of the items you see here and talk on curriculum and all that's happened since we left school. So we will now be bringing students back in a bit of a phase here over a couple of days. So on Tuesday, September 8th, all students will have a remote day, and that'll be a way for classes to be together, especially at the middle and high school, where in a hybrid model, that doesn't really happen as easily. So we will be doing some virtual onboarding. Wednesdays are going to be early release days across all of the schools. So that will mirror the normal Wednesday before Thanksgiving schedule. So for you, Mr. Cameron, is that 11:30 dismissal?
Yep, that is 11:30 at Sanborn for our 7th and 8th graders and 11:40 for our 6th graders.
Right. So since that would be the case on that Wednesday, September 9th, the committee decided that, first the calendar committee and then the school committee decided that it made sense to start the hybrid rotation on the 10th, Thursday the 10th. So we will be bringing students in person on the 10th with remote days on the 8th and the 9th at the middle school. And then the hybrid switch starts up. And I just feel the need to say this everywhere I go, that that's the plan as of today, pending a lot of variables that could change between now and then, the health data being the primary driver. So we could talk more on that when we get to the questions and answers, but that is the plan. I do think those dates will hold. It would be the model that would alter. So the first day of school in Concord officially is Tuesday, September 8th. We will get all that out to you in writing very shortly.
Great. I may have reversed the Wednesday. This is all going to be sent in a part packaged together as a part of the CMS summer and fall reopening website. And what a good segue. So this website here, which is not published to parents just yet, will have many resources in the left-hand column, including a new calendar of the new school year with the new opening day for our students. And a lot of other resources. This is still being built as we host this webinar. And I would say it's probably going to be It's going to be published and live and ready for our families and our students, I would say late on Sunday. It also gives many summer resources that have been shared a few times, including, let's see here, the supply lists that were emailed out. And every email I send this summer, including the email I sent yesterday, which I believe is right here, if you're viewing it on your phone, you might see this at the bottom. If you're viewing it on the computer, it's going to be to your right. So a part of the CMS summer and fall Google site has a link of all the emails that I send in case you missed something, which is right here. And that resource is also available to you in every email that I send with this hut link that is right here. Click here for all CMS 2021 emails. There's going to be a lot of information, and I just feel it necessary to restate what Dr. Hunter said. The title of this video is Middle School Preliminary Reopening. And the reasons why we are waiting to build those social story videos mentioned just a little earlier is that we're refining those plans. The task force is refining those plans in these next couple weeks. And we want to make sure that we really get into the weeds with another parent guardian webinar at the end of August and another student webinar at the end of August and a release of all those videos mentioned now a few times. I see there is a question in the chat. Again, the question in the chat, and I haven't read it, might be answered with the questions that were pre-submitted this past week. So we're actually going to transition right there. And, you know, as many of our teachers did this past spring in teaching on Zoom in a remote fashion, if you have something to jot your question down so you don't forget it, but you might want to not put it in the chat just yet, because your question might actually be answered. Mr. Steffi, are we ready to go to the questions?
We are indeed ready. Dr. Hunter, you are first, and Karen, you are second.
Okay, and here's our first question. So what opportunities will there be for my child to be with his friends, their friends in the other cohort? The AK split creates a situation where my child is mostly isolated from, let's say, their group of friends. To what degree is this split confirmed?
Yeah, thank you. We've talked a lot about this split, and probably it is a solid commitment, and I want to be sure we explain why. We knew that we were creating an issue here, and I guess the theme of tonight is every decision that's been made had negatives to the outcome of what we were going to, which direction we were going to go. So we knew this was going to be a challenge, but the only way to minimize class size, if kids come as a grade level, which is usually what's suggested to us, if kids come at a grade level, they're all still in class together. And then the only options we have are to start separating kids who are in the same class in more spaces throughout the building, when indeed the goal is that we don't need to keep finding more spaces. So it becomes very, very difficult to accomplish the goal of smaller numbers of kids in classrooms. So we've searched high and wide to see if other districts have come up with another answer to the negative piece of that, or find another way to split them. We haven't found anyone yet. We've been working on this a lot at the high school because we heard a lot from the kids up there. We were brainstorming ideas there, and we just haven't been able to come up with anything that's going to not create other issues or allow us to meet the safety guidelines. So that means we're going to have to commit to being creative. That's important to us. And we'll have to look at ways for kids to spend time together. I think one piece of the answer is extracurriculars and creating opportunities for kids that way. So we're committed to that, whatever that's going to look like, whether it be remote or modified in person. So more to come, but it's important to us and really matters to us, and maybe was one of the most challenged pieces of all of this work, was knowing we were going to be creating that. But if the goal is to get back to school, pending the health data and everyone being safe, there were just compromises. There was no other option around that. So I wish I had the perfect answer there. I don't, but the split is firm.
Dr. Hunter, the after-school program is going to be talked about. We had some parents and guardians who submitted questions. So that's a time where the sixth grader who's really good friends with the eighth grader, and in Concord they're separated by buildings, always find each other. And the after-school program plays such an essential role in kids' social development and making new friends. The task force this evening did virtual Zoom visits with 4 other middle schools today to learn what they're doing. I won't name this middle school, but there was one middle school when we asked, so what does your after school program look like in a hybrid or even possibly remote? And this middle school said, I haven't really thought about that. We're not quite sure if we're even gonna have an after school program. And I measured the nonverbal of the CMS task force because we know what an essential role that's played. Finally, I will mention there are a lot of teachers who are talking about buddying up the cohort that is in school with a buddy that is at home. So we might see some synergy between the two groups and some friends making some connections, even if they're in different parts of the alphabet. Mr. Steffi, where's this question?
Yep, Ms. Baker, this question's for you. Ms. Jemison, you're up next.
Great, I'll read it. We have ordered a basic set for our rising sixth graders from the first day supply list. It doesn't contain all items that are on the list that we saw on the middle school website. I mean, the detailed list of supplies, get to the question, do we need to get everything now or can we wait until school starts?
The answer is you probably want to wait till school starts to purchase or locate the grade specific items. Again, just we don't know week to week how things are going, and so I think your teachers will be ready for you to have time to get those materials that you'll need later then.
Yep, and there's nothing wrong with, if you're able to get some or close to all, here even in early August. It's just as the vision of school becomes clearer, there might be some shifting that's done. I want to mention, and this is going to be big with our students being the audience tomorrow, the backpack is always a universal supply, but the role of the backpack in reopening schools, not just in the middle school, but the high school as well, is going to be essential. All students will be carrying a backpack and they will not be using their lockers to really, the lockers unfortunately bring our students together and we can't maintain that 6 feet. Now I will say, I think for the most part, our students are gonna celebrate this, especially it was a year ago. It was basically, I was sharing with the rising 8th graders a year ago, saying that we were undoing their 8th grade privilege of carrying their backpacks. So all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are gonna be carrying a backpack with their school supplies, with their school issued laptop. It always brings up cell phones as well. If middle school students do have cell phones, they can have it off and in their backpack. And again, if you have any questions, we'll get to those questions if they're not answered here.
All right, Mr. Cameron, 29 more to go.
Is that a nudge that we need to pick up the pace?
Usually it's I that's a bit long-winded. Yes, I'm jiving.
Okay. Miss J, I think this is yours.
Miss J, this is you, and Miss Bradford, you're next.
Can you please let us know exact times of the beginning and end of the school day? And as Mr. Cameron had said, the website is going to be published this weekend, and you'll be able to go right in there and see the whole bell schedule for both buildings.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Steffi?
Ms. Bradford, this is you. Dr. Hunter, you're next.
How will you keep the classrooms comfortable on hot days?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this. Sanborn and Peabody are the only non-climate controlled settings in the district. And it's really, really hard to keep them comfortable on hot days. We're gonna have other variables this year with masks and only very specific fan usage. We've been talking a lot with our HVAC consultant about how that could and can't work. So we do have some concern there for sure. And we're gonna really maybe have to go to some remote options if it's really hot. We're not gonna have the same drive to push through it as we have in other years because of all these other things that are going on. So we're gonna have to take it a day at a time. I think the good news is we have a remote option that's very similar and mirrored just like the hybrid model with schedules and all. So we're trying to build something fluid and keep instruction going. So we're all concerned that that's not going to work this year. So a little heads up to parents that it could be we end up having to go remote if it gets really hot in the middle schools. I'm hoping with the delayed start, we avoid some of that. But.
And of course, this is a reality where all adults and staff and students are wearing masks for most of the day. So I wanted to mention that as well. Mr. Steffi, who has this question?
Next slide is Ms. Bradford. Thank you.
How will band and after-school sports work upon return to school? So for band and for PE, we've received some pretty specific guidance from the state. Band, certain instruments need to practice a certain distance apart and outside, but we're committed to our music program and still working with our incredibly passionate music department to figure out how to make those work safely for students. The sports were a little bit in the hands of the MIA in terms of interscholastic sports, but as you heard from Mr. Cameron, we really believe sports are important to SEL for social emotional aspect of school for students, and want to figure out a way to make those extracurriculars work.
Thank you.
Great. Dr. Hunter?
Okay. Oh, great. So in terms of, I'll start with fire drills. Fire drills, we've already been speaking with the fire department. I think the good news there is that they are supportive of the fact that we aren't going to change a whole lot. We're just going to do it slower and make sure we're spread out and do it in that way. It will still be the same exercise and getting used to knowing the routes out of the buildings, and that's really what's important to them. Speed, I learned from talking to them, speed is the secondary priority. So we're glad we're going to be able to do that. We're still in discussion on the active shooter and Alice drills. We'll be talking with Concord Police. My suspicion is it's going to look a lot more like our safety in place kind of a mode where we essentially just freeze the building and maybe not do the whole process of what a formal Alice drill would be, which we haven't done with the middle school kids in the last few years. We've done modified versions. So more to come on that. Fire drills will happen. We still have the state law to uphold 4 times a year. They'll just be done in a different pace.
So what we've done is we've done presentations of the student enrolled during an Alice drill. We actually haven't run the drill. Right. Because, you know, we could actually effectively, you know, in traditional years, gather our group of parents and, you know, choose the side of the room, you know, as far as the importance of actual practicing or what practicing does, many NPR stories to the, you know, mental health of our students as well. So a presentation of what your role is could possibly happen, but that's going to be a conversation district-wide as well. Mr. Steffi?
Next question is for you, Mr. Cameron, and for Dr. Hunter.
Yep, so we already answered the start date. And when do we find out if kids are being bused or if they need to drive? Dr. Hunter?
Yes, so on my list of to-dos, I'm aiming for tomorrow will be a transportation survey. And really, we're going to start to use the word waiver, that you would release us if you're able to help with transportation. That will be important. We're a little better off than we thought we might be, especially at the middle and high school. The hybrid model already has reduced the capacity of the buses significantly. The state has told us we can have 1 student per seat unless they're siblings. And so that is our maximum. And if we need to reallocate or even reroute buses so they may go to neighborhoods twice, we would do that based on those who agree to drive their children for a certain period. I think we're going to be asking if you can give your seat up from September to December, and if you indicate that, we would not put you on the routes. So it's a little different than the way this is worded. We will assume you need transportation unless you opt out. So that form is coming tomorrow, I expect.
The last question, will students be graded as usual? The answer is yes. We are returning back, I believe, district-wide to traditional grading, which I think looks different at the elementary school, or it's going to be traditionally like they've had it. And grades 6 through 12 will be the traditional grading scale of A through F. Regular tests and exams will return as well. Both these answers remain consistent even if we go remote. Same thing with attendance. DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is requiring, and quite frankly, we are glad that they are requiring regular attendance, reports of attendance, and the return of traditional grades and transcripts as well. Mr. Steffi, who's this question?
Ms. Bradford has the 9th and 10th slides.
Is this the 9th slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. 2 middle school students are in group 1. As far as the remote day schedule, will they be required to log in first thing in the morning? Is there going to be a live stream day period to period? So we're still working on this aspect of what I think this question is about the students in the hybrid model on their day at home. They will follow their schedule. The idea is that they're Zooming in for at least part of the class. And we've been working a lot to think about various ways that this could work well for students and allow the teacher to give really good attention to the small group in front of them, while also making sure that the student at home is participating in meaningful curriculum there. So there are a lot of different models that could take. And as you hopefully know, our teaching staff is pretty creative and amazing. So I think I could share a few things now, and there'll be a much longer list as folks get more practice with this. The second question, required for directed study in gym. So gym would continue to be a class. There are some specific rules involved in terms of which equipment can be used and shared and how close students can be when they're in school. But there would be remote activities for students to participate in as far as gym. And for a study, I think it would be time for students to work on that assigned work, even if they're at home, that they would get later in the day. Will the teachers be wearing a mask during instructional time? Yes. And the district has ordered some clear masks that this person is talking about, which does help with students' ability to hear instructions if they can see the mouth, and also nice to see a teacher smile. I think we've talked about that aspect of it. That's it.
Great. Ms. Bradford, you had this one as well.
Oh, 6th grade recess. Yes, there's going to be 6th grade recess. My favorite time of day, every day last year. Love 6th grade recess. We have come up with a great lunch plan that allows for a small recess group. Lots of activities possible out there. Again, we need to follow the guidelines. And then the second part of this question about personalized name boxes for masks. So I think this is a middle school approach. We're not going to have the name boxes, but we're going to support students in coming up with their own system for keeping their mask safe and hygienic.
This is a good opportunity to share that we will be having a date that is unique, a Zoom webinar that is unique only to new families that have moved into Concord. A lot of times when we cite, we're going back to the traditional fill in the blank. Yes, we're going to have recess because we've always had it. Our new families actually don't know all those things. So we have formally brought our new families together every August. Last year, not sure why, we did it at the Ripley building. This year it will be a Zoom, and that date will be shared out to all of our new families in the coming week or so.
Mr. Cameron, you were reconfiguring both schools a year ago.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That was 4 lifetimes ago.
Yes, it was.
Ms. Jensen, you have the next question.
Okay. So as far as what is considered a fever, CPS, so for the district, we will consider a person to have a fever if they have a measured temperature of 100.0 or greater. So that's going to be our number that we're using for our self-monitoring.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. This is you.
What kind of extra support will be available for those students who are in a directed study or any student that needs extra guidance? The answer depends on whether or not the student is in a directed study in the building. Any middle school team approach, and that is a philosophy that we have here at Concord Middle School, is if they're in a directed study, their core teachers should be available to check in with for that extra support and that extra help. As Olive said just a couple minutes ago, a directed study, when the student is in their remote day, is a period of time where they can get some of their work done, but there's nothing in terms of a structure that is offered to students. We are in conversations about an all remote schedule and what type of supports we can offer students, all students, in terms of academic advising, the role of academic advising in our home base, which is our advisory program, and where that plays a role as well.
Mr. Green, this is you.
Lincoln, you just need to mute yourself. There you go.
There a plan to make sure that students will be able to interact socially as part of the in-school and remote school days? Recess, home base, and other after-school programs are ways for students to connect, while students are like Zooming in. Home base and after-school activities will be held virtually.
Awesome. Thank you, Lincoln.
Great. Dr. Hunter, this is you, please.
Great. So are there plans for increasing ventilation in the school buildings or installing Hepa filters in the rooms based on the science out there that can significantly reduce the risk of transmission? So this week, we actually have an HVAC consultant going through all of our schools. He'll probably finish tomorrow. He will have a report to us by the weekend that outlines what he found in terms of needs, strengths. He'll be making recommendations like that with the filters. We've talked a lot about the filters and are already using the highest grade we can in the machines that we have. He'll be recommending if there's any places we should be adding HEPA filters, doing any other duct work, or making sure that levers are working, especially in the Sanborn and middle school buildings. They are clearly our oldest infrastructure, but what we have already learned from him, that the older codes actually had a greater airflow. So there's actually some positive to that in a way we probably wouldn't have expected. But he has to give us the report to let us know that all of the individual pieces are working. There's a considerable regulation in place for schools typically. So now we're trying to take that to the next step. And we're looking forward to that report. That'll be our guideline for the work we do for the rest of the summer. We will also be regularly air quality testing so that we can ensure that the ventilation stays to the maximum of our abilities during the school year. So watch for more to come. Once that report gets to us this weekend, we'll be sharing it pretty quickly thereafter.
Dr. Hunter, and being in a meeting with you and the consultant earlier this week, I want to share with all our families one of the bigger aha moments he had. And a member of our task force, the famous Mr. Jim Bozak, keeps reminding the task force of the fact that because Concord Middle School takes 3 grades and splits them into 2 buildings, and then we divide them again in half, the Peabody total capacity of students allowed is, I think, somewhere in the high 300s, and we're only going to have about 100 in that building in the hybrid model. And Sanborn is close to 600 students, the occupancy permit, and we're only going to have about 240 students. So from an occupancy standpoint, even though the 2 buildings are the oldest in the district, we are only filled to capacity at about 1/4 at Peabody and about 1/3 at Sanborn. And this was very significant to the HVAC consultant. You know, how many bodies are you going to have in the buildings? How much are you spreading them out? And, you know, what is the building, what was it built for? So I just wanted to offer that as well.
Wonderful. Maya, this question is you.
This would be a big yes.
Okay. The question, will each student be given a laptop to do the Zoom meetings and homework on? That is a big yes. So stay tuned for our rising sixth grade families about our sixth grade laptop distribution. Dr. Hunter, fact check me really quickly here. I believe I heard all sixth graders are going to be getting new laptops, brand new laptops.
We are purchasing a good number of laptops. I'm not exactly sure who's getting what because I've had multiple conversations at each level. So more to come.
Okay, more to come.
Yeah.
That's why my fact checker is here. Mr. Stefan.
Ms. Jemison, this question's for you.
If my children attend school in person, but at any time, if decided we want to switch distant learning, can we? And that's yes. We just would talk to the administration.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Bradford. You're up.
Yes, so the plan is to try to group students into home bases based on which group that they're in. So that if I had a home base this year, which was great, my home base would all be in the A through K group, for example. Those 12 students I'd meet with on person on Monday, and then I'd Zoom with on Tuesday.
This is where, the task force really has to keep in mind that 1/3 of the audience tomorrow isn't going to know the term home base. And we got to keep that in mind in that unique Zoom that we do with all of our new families, 6 through 8 as well. Home base, again, is our advisory program.
Nurse Jensen, this question's for you.
Okay, so for students that have health problems, how are we going to handle the social distancing? So yes, definitely our health offices are going to look different. And as far as all schools having an isolation room to do evaluations, that's going to be new this year. But as far as, if I'm kind of reading into this question a little bit, but the nurses will all be giving the same care as we always have. We'll be wearing extra PPE. So if we are, doing things in close contact, the kids will see us wearing gowns and, eye protection, face shields, things like that. But all health needs will still be addressed at school. And if regardless of us having to social or physical distance. But if I didn't answer that, please shoot me an email and we can go into it further.
Dr. Hunter, this question's for you.
Oh, sure. So a little more on busing. Are you waiving the bus for the entire year? No, we will be asking you to do that from September through December. And certainly we know that your situations may change. And if that is the case, yes, you would need to let us know and we would do our best to turn that around for you as quickly as possible. Obviously, the more stable we are, the better. But if things happen, which they certainly can, you would just need to let Justin know that and we would work with you.
Great, thank you. This question, Ms. Bradford, part 1 and Ms. Bren, part 2.
Sure. So we got into this a little bit with the what are students doing at home question. The further explain the live classes. So live classes will be planned for the teacher working with the students in front of them, but also managing the instruction in some mode for the teachers who are at home. So there might be a day when the teacher really is doing a demonstration or lecture where it makes sense for the audience, the at-home audience and the in-person audience of students to all be watching that teacher. But the teachers at Concord have lots of different modes the class runs in, and so we can take advantage of this remote and at-home situation differently. So maybe the teacher introduces an activity to the whole group at home and remote and in person, and then maybe the students who are at home Zoom off and complete that activity, or maybe the students in person buddy up since they won't be able to sit close to somebody in the room, buddy up with somebody remotely and are working with a peer on that activity. So it's not that one mode of the students watching the class from at home. And somebody in the chat had asked about the term synchronous, which is what that is. But just lots of different ways for that teacher to be managing the learning for the at home and in person.
And I'll similarly just expand on that. Again, if a student is on that remote day and they're receiving services, they're receiving them remotely. They can certainly count on all of their services on their IEP delivered in an instructional way. So that might look like if a child's in a workshop and a workshop, writer's workshop, for example, is on their schedule for that day, they're Zooming in, participating in that workshop with their services given in that instructional way. Similarly, if it's a child meeting with the speech and language or counseling, whatever's falling on their schedule that day, will continue to meet as if they're in school or at home remotely. So those services will certainly continue.
Great, Mr. Cameron, this question's for you.
What does the 100 remote option look like? That is actually coming to fruition at Dr. Hunter's level. Do you want to share?
Sure, I actually sent it before we got on, so
okay.
Yeah, so that feels good to be able to say that. So I sent to you as families at about 6:30 the individual remote learning plan overview, and I will qualify all this by saying it is a high-level overview, and what is in there is draft, as well as the form where you can opt to have your child go to 100% remote option, even if we're in person. It is similar in what we've just heard Ms. Bradford describe for the hybrid days. We know we have, need to sync that up so that it's consistently available to kids, that they will receive the instruction that they need while they're doing some of those other teaching styles and partnering with other kids in the room. So a lot of the challenge here was that we need to know who's going to participate to further the construction of the program. So it was important that we get that out to you at a high level so you would have some basic information. The details will come as we go through the next few weeks. We did ask, if possible, that you would let us know by the middle of next week. If that isn't possible, or you still have a lot of questions, we'd encourage you to reach out to Mr. Cameron. We're just trying to work with families really at a very individual basis on this question and help you make the most informed decision that you can, knowing that we're trying to build something really fluid too, because you're clearly operating with unknowns and may have things that need to get adjusted.
Thank you. What tech is being used for the remote learning? We're a district that has been committed to the Apple product, which makes us very unique. 1980s, I think all public schools were doing Apple. I've heard from some of my colleagues in other districts that their ordering of Chromebooks is 2-3 months out. And we're still in a very good place, fortunately, where even replacement laptops are coming to us within weeks, I believe, Dr. Hunter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that commitment to make sure that students in a hybrid or in a remote, the #1 delivery done by the leadership team at Concord Middle School and by Sean Cesare, who is our district our middle school technology guru, was delivering of technology and the support of technology. How will mask wearing and distancing be monitored and enforced? Through the presence of adults all throughout the building. We're still at a level in middle school where even before COVID, everywhere students went, there was always eyes and monitoring. Middle school is not a time where they would enter into, say, an academic study, or even in an event where we might be short coverage, we would throw them in a room where they would not have an adult present. We're very fortunate in this area. Even our library is a good example. I know many schools that obviously have a library in their school, but do not have staff in the library that are dedicated librarians, and we actually have assistants to our librarians as well. So everywhere there will be adults supporting our students. What if parents don't report a COVID illness? I'm going to give that one over to Dr. Hunter.
So I guess my first answer is that we need to really be working together. There is a structure for people who live within Concord that will get reported directly to the Board of Health through the software system the state's developed, that any positive test cases for residents are automatically brought to the public health nurse. And then she follows up on the contact tracing and the follow-up. We will be working with them, but they take the lead at that point. So that's the assurance for anyone living within Concord. Clearly, we have students coming from Boston and sometimes a handful of other communities. Those will need to be self-reported, and we need to be very clear up front at the beginning of the year, and we are developing a parent contract. I think that's what this pertains to, a student contract as well, but the reporting at this level, I feel, is a parent piece, really being clear about what the expectations are. I go into the year feeling quite comfortable. I had nothing but very open lines of communication back in February and March, and I feel like that was in a time where it was a lot more unknown as to what was happening. People calling you with even the hint of something going on. I think we're all so much more informed now. I want to believe that this community wants to work together and support one another, not put each other at risk. So there is a community piece to this. We all have to work together. But for the in Concord folks, there is a pipeline of information to us.
And before we move on, I want to just comment on like the last part of this. But the trauma care that this author is citing, I'm going to give that either to Dr. Hunter or Meg in a second. But the piece about, allowing teachers to effectively just focus on remote and nothing else other than remote. The hybrid model is providing, and the Office of Teaching and Learning, Kristen Herbert's office, is providing comprehensive professional development. If you're a hybrid teacher, you're a remote teacher. So that professional development is happening this summer. This isn't, we started the summer thinking and DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, wanted all students back at the same time. That's vastly different from a remote. Hybrid and remote really have a synergy together where teachers, since hearing that we're going hybrid, have been working on supporting and building their remote skills. The trauma care.
Can I take that one?
Sure, please do.
Yeah, I've answered this a few times in parent emails. And I just want to add on to what Justin said. We've planned for every scenario. So we are actively building hybrid and remote. There was never a time one was off the table, even if it looks like one might be more likely to happen. And that could change again as August goes. So I don't want people to think we haven't been working through both. We all, I think, see that there could be a strong likelihood remote will happen at some point, even if it isn't the beginning of the year. So you're going to have to ensure our communication with each other as August moves on, especially as the health data starts to tick up here the last week or so. In terms of trauma care, I think we ended up creating a little bit of a jargon issue there, because trauma-based education is a very common topic in our world as educators, and it really is about an approach of a holistic way to try to be sure you're reaching the social emotional needs of kids. My research and study of this is that it's the word trauma often because it's been coming out of some of the urban settings with kids who have experienced more firsthand per se kinds of trauma. That said, the aspects of it are very well suited to the social emotional work that we were already doing. And again, it's really just being sure you're caring for the social emotional needs while you're also caring for the academic needs of children. I think the task force that put that in, which was the Whole Child Task Force, felt a need to name it as such because we are all living through crisis here, and we want to not dismiss that. Kids have been home for 6 months. That's a long time and a very different routine. Coming back to school will be different, and we want to address and support them through that. So I think the trauma word perhaps got misinterpreted a bit based on its definition in isolation, but in this approach, it's a means of providing education in a very thoughtful, emotionally supportive way.
Thank you. Just have a few more questions and then we're going to go to the chat.
Dr. Hunter, this question is for you.
Okay. Accommodations will be made for remote students, dedicated teachers to the group. And I think this is referring to the individual remote students who are selecting that as we speak based on the plan that I sent out. So this, I think, is similar to the answers we've provided in the past, where they will have a schedule and follow a set of classes, as similar to if they were in school. Very much like the hybrid mode. I know there was a question earlier on special education and services. If a student with any of those needs is 100% remote, we will provide that. It will be in the remote fashion. We may need to take a look at who the service provider will be, just because we need to be sure that schedules sync up, but everything will be intact. Again, that's why it's really important we start to gather individual names this week, so we have a few weeks to work with the individual level of planning that needs to occur. Follow up on the technology piece that's there. We've actually been testing this. We have cameras that extend and allow for the camera to be dedicated while the teacher can still use the Zoom host machine that they have. We have adults who've been Zooming in, for lack of our better word, that's our new technology term. And they've been able to very much hear. They also can sync up the interactive board that's in the room with the student's screen. So that was a benefit I didn't expect we would be able to accomplish. But as those interactive boards are being used by teachers in the live setting, the kids at home will have them broadcast onto their laptop screens. So we're getting that all fine-tuned. The teachers are going to get exposure to it as we put it to video this week, and then we'll be working with them on training and such. That is part of the August dates leading to the delay of school starting, so we have time to work through all of that.
Great. Ms. Brand, this question is for you, and Ms. Nugent, you are the next question.
Great. So will all students on an IEP be attending school on Wednesdays? The simple answer to that question is no. Students on IEPs are following the schedule of their assigned alphabetical grouping. So they're following that in school, out of school, remote day. If this is a question that's digging a little deeper about a family with a child that has either more significant or unique needs, and you have specific questions about your individual child and situation, then certainly that's something that we can discuss, reach out, and certainly happy to have those conversations and share DESE guidelines along that line.
So what will after school clubs look like for 6th graders, and will we be getting a supply list, or is it already published somewhere? There will definitely be clubs. We're still having conversations about how exactly that will present, but there will be clubs, there will be sports. We are committed to that. And Mr. Cameron has emailed out a supply list to the parents, and it will also be published on the website, which is being linked on Sunday.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. You're up next.
The roadmap plans don't include the middle school moving or working in cohorts. So are all of them going to intermingle with their half of the alphabet all over the school? Wouldn't it be possible to have cohorts dictated by, say, math class or world language, and keep the number of exposures to a minimum? I thought DESE guidelines suggested cohorts, but I could have been mistaken. Thank you. So DESE did say that cohorts provide an advantage to the students, not so much the adults at a secondary level. I did a lot of digging. Again, the task force did Zoom virtual visits with Curtis Middle School, RJ Gray Junior High School, Carlisle Middle School, and Milliken Middle School in Northborough. The reason why we extended out to Northborough is because much like buying a house, we had to extend our circle to try to find a middle school, and we found no high schools that were able to cohort. Millikan Middle School cohorts a little, but they break what's called the bubble, or break the cohort, for their world language, for their math, and for their music. Millikan is structured pretty similar to Concord Middle School. I would say we have a more robust world language program, offering families and students more often, more choices rather. And even the principal at Millikan said a lot of work went into the cohorting, and the cohorts, when together, are not balanced very well. And once you break it, to me, that's where my logic kicks in as far as how much work it goes into cohorting, and why you would just do that for 3 periods. We actually found one more middle school. We didn't Zoom virtual site visit with them today. Quinn Middle School in Hudson is the only middle school I found that does a lockdown cohorting, where the assistant principal who I spoke with on Sunday, actually it wasn't Sunday, it was a while back, not only built the cohorts, but he has 2 of his own students in the cohort. He shared with me with great candor that he has groups of students, because they want to maintain some math leveling, that have very significant special education needs. In a group of 11, he named a number of groups that have 6, 7, 8 students on IEPs in that group of 11. They also had to ask families to re-choose their music choices and to re-choose their world language choices. So there are health benefits for certain, but if we go remote, or when we need to go remote, we lose all the benefits of cohorting, and there's a real stressor in the conversation about what cohorting does to the academic integrity of middle school. Quite frankly, it is ability-based grouping on steroids, in my opinion, and to have that either in a full remote environment is something that we're not interested in, and to have it in an event of a vaccine and all student return is certainly not something that would be supported community-wide either.
Maya, this question is for you.
Okay, so all students and families can sign up. For 7th graders, how are we going to get to know our way around the school? All students and families can sign up for a self-guided tour with the students' schedules on August 17th.
Thank you. And there's going to be wide windows available, including for all our working parents. We're going to open up both buildings some evenings as well. And the way that looks is you're going to sign up for a slot, and there might be, 5, 8 other families that are touring around as well. All direction arrows, all walking pathways will be designated. All classrooms, actually they are right now. If I'm at Sanborn, if I walk out, all classrooms are set up in a hybrid. Cafeterias will be set up. And that week of August 16th, I think, provides 3 full calendar weeks until students return. I think this might be the last question.
This question is from Ms. Baker, and we have about 5 questions following this, Mr. Cameron.
5 questions.
Okay, will CMS teachers only be teaching their specific content area? Will they be paired with a CMS co-teacher or substitute who would share in the teaching of math, English, social studies, and science, etc.? Will students be switching classes as they typically do? Well, for the first one, we are going to continue to plan to have all teachers instructing within their area of licensure and expertise. So the teachers who teach math will be with teaching math, and they'll each be doing their subject that they're certified in. And for the second one, students will be switching, they'll rotate with their class schedule. So just as they normally would, it'll be hybrid, but it'll just be half, fewer students. So it'll be smaller switching.
Great, thank you, Ms. Baker. Dr. Hunter, you're next.
If a student chooses total remote learning, will they be allowed to play after-school sports based on whatever's permitted? The answer to that is yes. We consider the choice to be remote a family decision, as would the choice to participate in the after-school activities. So that would be a family option.
Great, Ms. Bradford?
How will remote students be taught so that their learning is interactive with their teachers as well as with their peers? I actually think we've tackled that question. If whoever wrote this wants to chat with something more refined that they're wondering about, I'd be happy to answer it.
Great. The third to last question is for Nurse Jensen and for Dr. Hunter.
If there is a need for contact tracing in school, what are the details of this and who will conduct this tracing? So our local Board of Health, Dr. Hunter had mentioned this, is handling the contact tracing. What they'll be doing is contacting the school nurses who will assist them in classroom contacts if needed. So basically, just to reiterate what Dr. Hunter said, really self-reporting to the schools, to the principal and the nurse, I think is encouraged. But as much as you can cooperate with Board of Health when you're notified, if you're notified of a positive case, and sharing that information, it's going to be most beneficial to us as a whole school, as a community. So really appreciated. We really will appreciate everybody's openness and sharing names and that personal information with the school. I hope I answered that okay.
Thank you.
Great. Dr. Hunter, this is the second to last question for you.
I think we've answered this, so I'll do what was just suggested. If you have follow-up questions after both reading what we sent tonight and hearing other responses, by all means, reach out to us. The answer is yes, the subject teachers will be the instructors, and essentially the same program will be available to you, just not in the in-person format.
And Ms. Bradford, this is the last question for you.
Can you please describe the methods of remote learning both for the days? So we covered the days that students are at home, and in the event that a full remote learning model becomes necessary. Methods of remote learning, I think some of what teachers experimented with last spring, using a combination of direct instruction, time for students to have guided practice, use of the breakout rooms in Zoom, a combination of Google Classroom as the platform where assignments are posted. We have a lot of adaptive learning tools that students were working with, IXL in math, no-read in English. So just making use of the technology as much as possible for students to have access to their teachers, but also be accessing content and skills where they are with those adaptive learning tools.
Great, thank you. So I have a question, Dr. Hunter, in terms of, my Zoom, leading in a Zoom, I think I'm pretty proficient, but in a webinar, Dr. Hunter, do you know the middle school admin team have been answering questions in the chat? The entire audience of almost 200, do they have access to those questions and answers?
They should, if they've been answered. They can't see them when they're in the open category, which we can see, but they should be able to see the question and the answer once you've answered it.
Excellent. So it is 8:17. Why don't we only ask aloud and answer aloud the questions that have not been answered with a typed response. Mr. Steffi, do you want to ask those questions aloud?
First ones, are there electives? When will kids get to choose those electives?
Yep, so 6th and 7th graders are involved in a program called RTI, RTE. and we're going to do some universal screening when students return back to school to really measure, where they are at grade level. Often even after a summer, it's called the summer slide. There's another term in education right now called COVID slide. And each is trying to measure the regression and where students are. So 6th and 7th graders are going to be given a universal screener through technology. It's called STAR in both math, reading, and social and emotional. The social and emotional screener, all parents have to opt into and sign off on. And if 6th and 7th graders, if after taking those universal screeners, if they do not assess into what's called an intervention in the area of math, reading, or social and emotional, then within, I would say, about 2 weeks or so, 6th and 7th graders will be given a menu, an option of choosing what are called enrichment classes, which is in pretty much electives. 8th graders will be receiving electives as well. We will be also giving a universal screener to our 8th graders. Our 6th graders, though, even though we give the universal screener, our 6th graders all take a shared and have a shared experience called fundamentals. It's an introduction to middle school. It's a course that all 6th graders take for the first 3 months of middle school.
Wonderful, thank you. How will the release of school be structured as to not have so many parents and students attempting to leave the school all at the same time?
Yep. So again, this is where, when we did a site visit to the 4 middle schools in talking about their arrival and their dismissal, Curtis Middle School, even in a hybrid model, has almost 500 students in a building. CCHS, has almost 500 students in a building. The elementary schools, in an all student return in half days, Dr. Hunter, is around 380, 420, I believe. The middle school, Peabody, again, I mentioned this earlier, has just a little over 100 students in a hybrid model, and Sanborn 7th and 8th graders going to have around 240 or so. We are looking at doing arrival and dismissal very differently at Sanborn, and we're not quite ready yet to share how that's going to look. Peabody has a separate designated bus drop-off and a separate designated parent drop-off, which is so important for any new school building to be designed with. And that's what we're looking to do at Sanborn as well.
Thank you very much. Will there be a late bus for after-school activities?
I believe so. Dr. Hunter?
So, well, yeah, we're still talking about that because we just have to see how things are panning out at the elementary schools and the runs that go after you. So more to come.
My son is brand new to the school and he is in the METCO program. Is it possible to still have the Family Buddy program, even if it's a virtual? Thank you.
So I believe this is the what used to be referred to as, and maybe still is, the METCO Friends and Family program. I know it's been revamped and rebooted. I'm going to ask Deborah to share. Is it still called the Friends and Family program?
It's called the Friends and Families program. And I think that, once checking with administration and with Mr. Namichi, that still is in conversations and stuff like that. So I just would have to check with him, and he'll get to the Boston family. So you can send him an email and he can answer that directly if you need to know.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you explain the quarantine process if my child is exposed to someone at school who tests positive? Does our family have to quarantine for 14 days?
Meg, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So a contact of a contact does not need to. So if you're considered a contact, your family members would be a contact of a contact, and they do not need to quarantine.
Thank you. Mr. Steffi, how many questions do you think we have left?
We are down to, Around 10
39.
questions.
10.
Around 10 questions.
All
Yep,
right.
we've answered 29.
We got this. It's 8:22. Let's do this by 8:30.
Awesome. Will there be a standardization across Google Classroom used by teachers? It was extremely challenging to navigate with my child when almost every teacher had a different approach, use of the various online resources.
Yes. Gosh, what a softball that I'm going to knock out of the park. The
Oh,
director,
you're going to take it? Yeah, you
the
deserve
director
it.
of teaching and learning is going to have a webinar for all parents, 6 through 12. And the webinar is going to have an intense focus on the shared practices that all teachers will have in Google Classroom. That webinar is on the list of summer dates right now. It's in boldface because it was added about 2 weeks ago.
Awesome, thank you. Will there be homework on top of the regular school day to be completed outside the hours of 8:30 to 2:40, regardless of hybrid or remote learning? Thank you.
I think a lot of homework is going to be shaped in, here's work that you can look to try and finish to the best of your ability in the time you have left in this period, either live when you're in person or at home. And a lot of students, and I struggled with this, 13-year-old Justin struggled with this in making the most of the in-person time. So I think a lot of that will be spilled over for what is traditional homework.
Great. About the lockers, the kids have a lot of things to carry around and a lot of materials that were requested. How can you help with this?
It's a great question. And I'm surprised it's 8:24 and I'm only saying for the second or third time, this is something we need to look at and get back to everyone on in late August.
In case we switch to full remote, how are we solving the tech challenge for teachers? Because it sounds like they have some specialized tech in the classroom, but what if they are at home?
Yep.
So I think at home, they'll have what they've had, which is their laptop and the Zoom. We did purchase based on their requests, and we will certainly continue to be open to these requests. We purchased tablets for the math teachers so that they had a second device and could share the written work that they had done on those tablets. So we're continuing to talk with teachers about what those needs are and expanding their toolkits. We've had some requests for document cameras and things like that. So the hub will be their laptop and the Zoom that they have. But if for especially certain content areas seem to benefit from certain tools, we're working really closely with them to provide for that.
Great. Will students be able to go to the library during lunch?
We don't know yet. We're still discussing lunch. We have pretty much what we believe lunch is going to look like, but we're reserving a rather large space to make sure that the 3 students who are here, part of our panel, has a sense of, this is the loss that we feel, and is there still an opportunity, because lunch is such an important social time. So we're still shaping lunch. We have it in broad strokes right now, so more to come.
Given that Ms. Stockwood was trying to figure out a way to get kids books while they were completely remote, I have a feeling they'll come up with something good.
Yes. Can you please clarify for remote students, if they are fully remote, they will still be with the same class of face-to-face in-class students? So they are Zooming every single day into live in-person classes, ?
Dr. Hunter, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, can you read it again just so I make sure I answer the right question?
Yep. Can you please clarify for the remote students? I believe that's the student group that is
the individual. Yeah, I've been trying to give it a new title so we don't get confused. Individual remote kids. Yep.
Yes. If they are fully remote, they will still be with the same class of face-to-face students, ? So they are Zooming every single day into live in-person classes?
Generally, that's true. We're leaving room for the fact that we don't want them in Zoom every minute of the day, but also that they may start in the class and then do independent work. But they're going to stay really connected to their classroom back at school and hopefully feel part of that community. That's the goal. So
great, thank you. Will students schedule a shift or change after factoring in the alphabet split and number of kids who will be full remote?
I can answer that if it would be helpful.
Sure.
So we got a printout of what all of the sections are and looked at numbers, and anticipate that once we get numbers for how many students are going to be in that completely remote group, we'll have a handful of sections that are really unbalanced. I mean, something like 11 and 10 is not going to be an issue. If it's 15 and 8, that's a different story. But it's under 10 sections that fall under that situation right now. And we anticipate that number will go down once students enroll in the totally remote option.
Great. Olive, to that question, how many kids will be in a class at a time?
With the hybrid?
This is a different question. I'm just putting sort of joining with that one. I think it's just generally wondering about what a average core class would be number wise.
So our largest core class at the moment is 23 if everybody was in attendance. And some of the world language classes are as low as something like 16. So looking at sort of half to a little over that for how many would be there in the hybrid model.
And 23 is the high. You know, our average is more, pretending that none of this was happening. Our average is more all of what, 19, 20?
Yeah, 19, 20, 21.
What about the material that was not covered at the end of this past school year? How and where are the kids going to catch up with that material?
Dr. Hunter, you and I had an instructionally focused discussion in the summer. I don't know how we found the time.
I know, that's fun when we can do that these days.
Yep. And you cited some research, but again, every profession is dealing with the same type of research. It's not peer reviewed. It's just, this unique time we're in. Do you want to share a little bit about what this, and if I forget the author, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's one of the professors out of Harvard. And it will depend on the content area, certainly. And Mrs. Baker can talk on math specifically, perhaps, because that's so sequential. But he had really recommended, I want to give background in that we very much have tracked what we've covered and what we haven't. So we're aware of where those gaps could be. His recommendation coming out of the Harvard School of Ed was not to backtrack, especially in the humanities per se, but to teach forward knowing that there were going to be gaps. And then as you hit a place where you didn't have the prerequisite skills intact because of the closure, then you could do that review piece and really work through what those topics were. So he didn't suggest that we go back and pick up where we left off March 12th and start school on September 8th as if we were back March 13th. He was really saying, think forward, look at your 2021 normal curriculum and plan ahead by finding where those known gaps will be, and know you're going to have to do some teaching, reteaching time along the way with that. I'm sure in math it's a little more linear than that. So to throw it to Mrs.
Talk to that a
Baker.
little bit. We've tracked,
Sure.
what each teacher is in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade were able to cover, and we did the power standards by the state. But a lot of math also does come back up again. So for instance, I have a lot of geometry that we do in 7th grade, and that again hits when you get to the 9th grade. And so, it'll work, as you said, as you go to do the algebra concept and you realize, oh, they need more practice on solving equations, you will have to go back and do that, impacting it overall. So I think everybody's in the same boat. So we will be just filling in those gaps as we go ahead.
This question is regarding delivery of IEP services. When students are home, either on off days in the hybrid model or if they are fully remote, will they be receiving special education services from teachers and staff who are concurrently serving in-person students? Who are currently serving in-person students. Ms. Brand, did you capture that question? Would you like me to repeat it?
I did capture that.
Okay, great. There's a second part.
I'm sorry, is there a second part?
There's a second part, but why don't, if it's okay, answer that one first.
Sure. And I think I did touch upon that a little bit earlier that if there's a service or a class that has a service and a child's on a home day, then they will be attending that from home remotely through an instructional model. And I can elaborate on that a little bit, but let me hear that second part in case it overlaps.
I have a great deal of concern about the district's ability to meet IEP needs if teachers will be torn between students in front of them and those zooming in from home. Additionally, will IEP services be more directed than they were in the spring? My child needs more than a teacher asking him, quote, "Do you have any questions," end quote, before he will always say no. Thank you for all of your efforts during this challenging time.
Sure. So, yep. So to answer that question, it will. To just rewind a little bit really briefly, last spring, we went into this closure sort of, obviously very abruptly. And through DESE guidelines, there was support and resources offered through special ed services. And it's really clear that remote learning moving forward is expected to be much more robust. And models of remote learning implemented last spring are not really going to look like what they're going to look like moving forward. The instruction and service delivery, again, is much more robust. And so what that's going to look like is really structured learning time, teletherapy, video conferencing, frequent communication, and direct service, whether it's in person or remotely. The resources and supports model that we were really living in last spring is allowed sort of as like a temporary measure right now until if it was allowed then, and if it needs to go back into effect, it's really as that temporary Band-Aid until that direct instruction and more robust instruction can be formulated. So yes, a quick answer to that is it will certainly look much more robust, and all services on IEPs will certainly be delivered.
Wonderful. We are down to 2 questions, team. This person comments that they had heard that there would be tents at school and was wondering what the school's plans are for outside instruction.
Yep. We are securing tents, and we might have 2 at the Sanborn campus and 1 at the PBD campus. Sanborn will also we're bringing our outdoor classroom up to code as well. So we might have as many as 3 outdoor spaces. Again, I have to restate, for one of the buildings that will be, so many less students than other buildings in the district. So we're very fortunate in that way. The way it will work for our teachers is that they can sign it out. It's akin to, 1997 and signing out a computer lab. They will have a sign out form that they can reserve that space and meet the students outside. Now on, cool autumn days of late September and October, teachers can actually use outdoor spaces that aren't in a tent, and that's not in our outdoor classroom as well.
Great. Our final question: with 10 fewer days, a half day once a week, and half remote learning, will students end up behind again this year?
Want me to grab that one?
Sure.
Sure. So we're going to this year with the highest expectations we can possibly have. We're going to be aiming for as much as the curriculum as possible. It is not the spring, for sure. We know there's going to be some challenges here, though. So there's going to have to be some understanding that we're going to pick the priority standards to cover. We've been able to take the summer to know what those prerequisite skills are. I think Mrs. Baker did a great job of articulating that in math. And then I think I also want to say there's ways to do things differently so that we don't just continue to try to do exactly what we were doing, but try to come at it in a different way that might use time differently or use the tools differently. So we're going to aim as high as possible. I think we all feel we need to qualify that because there's going to be a lot of other variables going on here that are going to compete for that time, especially at the early stage of the year. But I think it will feel much more normal school-like to you. And again, we're tracking all of this, so we will be sure. I don't expect you're going to have huge gaps in curriculum. There may be pieces of a content standard that don't get covered exactly as they used to, but it's not going to be these big gaping holes.
Thank you. So this is the time in a Zoom where the host starts thanking everybody and they see their participant keep dropping and dropping and dropping. But I do want to thank all the families for your engagement in early August about how school is going to look. We have to restate that everything said here is subject to change. I'm waiting, I said this to my leadership team, I'm waiting for the time that I answer a question differently a few weeks afterwards, and someone sends me my Zoom and say, hey, in minute 76, you answered. So everything here that has presented is subject to change. And again, I want to thank my task force who were together 13 hours ago at 7:30 this morning. And we're together again at 1 o'clock, and many of them were together in the Sanborn and Peabody buildings for most of the day on Monday. So thank you to this panel. We're looking forward to the student Zoom tomorrow at 7 p.m. If you have students who may have eavesdropped into this conversation, please encourage them to be there tomorrow. We're going to have some fun, and we're going to start building relationships. Thank you very much, everybody.